Most people think landscape painting is about adding lots of details, but the truth is, great landscapes are built on simple shapes and strong lighting. In this video, I'm going to show you my complete process of turning a blank canvas into this finished landscape painting. The very first step is creating a rough sketch. At this stage, I'm not trying to draw something perfect. Instead, I'm focusing on placing the main elements of the scene. For this painting, the building is the main subject, so I begin by drawing a center guideline. This helps me keep the structure balanced and symmetrical. Then I quickly block in the major shapes like the roof, the stairs, and the entrance. I keep the lines loose and rough because this stage is all about exploring the composition. Once the rough shapes are in place, I take a moment to check the composition. A good composition guides the viewer's eye naturally toward the focal point. In this painting, the entrance area acts as the focal point, so I adjust the shape slightly to make sure everything leads toward that area. Sometimes I also zoom out to see the painting from a distance. If something feels off, it's much easier to fix it now rather than later. After the sketch is ready, I begin blocking in the base colors. Instead of jumping straight into details, I start with large color shapes. For this painting, I use darker tones first to establish the environment. Dark blues and purples help create a dramatic and atmospheric mood. At this stage, the painting might look messy or unfinished, but that's completely normal. What matters is defining the big color relationships. Next, I focus on building the value structure of the painting. Values refer to how light or dark different areas of the painting are. Strong values help create depth and make the scene feel more realistic. I darken areas like the entrance and the inner parts of the structure to create a sense of depth. Meanwhile, I keep the outer surfaces slightly lighter so the architecture stands out. Now that the basic colors and values are established, I begin refining the shapes of the architecture. Instead of relying on line art, I paint the forms using light and shadow. By gradually defining the edges and planes of the structure, the building begins to feel more solid and three-dimensional. Once the main structure is clear, I start adding secondary elements. This could include environmental details like ground textures, surrounding elements, or subtle variations in the background. However, I try not to make these details too strong because I want the viewer's attention to stay on the main subject. Lighting is one of the most important parts of a landscape painting. At this stage, I start enhancing the light and shadow contrast. I deepen the shadows and add subtle highlights where the light would naturally hit the surfaces. I also adjust the color temperature slightly. Warmer lights and cooler shadows can make the scene feel much more dynamic and atmospheric. Another important step in the painting process is controlling edges. Not every edge in a painting should be sharp. Some edges should be soft and blended, while others should be crisp. Sharp edges usually attract the viewer's attention, so I place them near the focal point. Softer edges help create depth and make the painting feel more natural. Finally, I move on to the finishing touches. This includes refining textures, enhancing small highlights, and slightly increasing the contrast in important areas. But I try to avoid over-rendering the painting. Sometimes leaving areas slightly rough can actually make the artwork feel more painterly. And that's the complete process behind this landscape painting. From a simple sketch to a finished piece, the most important thing is focusing on composition, values, and lighting before worrying about details. If you found this process helpful, feel free to experiment with these steps in your own artwork.